Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Electric Ability for this week. No guest. I wanted to talk about some high school football stuff going on with the playoffs, about to enter the second round of the postseason coming up on Friday evening here in the Low Country. And basically what I wanted to talk about is how there needs to be less rounds of the playoffs in high school sports here in South Carolina. And it's not just about football. It's actually about every sport. I think everything needs to be cut down by at least one round, but I'm going to focus on football here because that's kind of the issue we had earlier this year. Starting back in the beginning of October. That's when the South Carolina High School League Executive Committee had a meeting because of all the hurricanes we had, and schools in the upstate had to miss a couple of weeks of the season, so they had to make up some time, get some games back in. So there was a couple of proposals at that point. One of them was to eliminate the first round of the playoffs, then push the season back a week. That way everything would stay on time to where it was, and the state championship games would still be held in Orangeburg in the first weekend of December. That vote got voted down by 11-3 margin. So overwhelmingly turned away because most people wanted to keep the 5 rounds of the playoffs intact as they were. Eventually, they decided to push the season back a week, push everything back a week, the start of the playoffs, and now the state final is going to be held in the second weekend of December in Orangeburg. But as of right now, 206 teams in South Carolina, high school league teams, play football. 176 of them make the playoffs. So that's pretty much 6 out of every 7 schools go to the postseason as of right now. Last season, after the first round, games were decided by a margin of 27.7 points per game. So that is almost 4 touchdowns per every game decided. That's how much a team would win by. Things keep going on right here. Now, of the 5, like I said, they wanted 5 rounds instead of 4. So after last week's first round, I went through each first round game, got the margin of victory, did everything, got the numbers. So here's what we're looking at for this year, and here's why we're keeping this first round of the playoffs. So there were 79 games in the first round of the playoffs last Friday night. 6 road teams won, so 6 out of 79 were upsets. And of those upsets, 2 of them were 9 versus 8 games, 3 of them were 10 versus 7 games. So teams that were pretty evenly matched and really no upsets going on in the first round. 17 of those games were decided by 10 points or less. So out of those 79 to 17 were games where the margin was even just a little bit over a touchdown. And I wanted to go through each classification and go through how each one was decided through that first round. So 5A Division I, the biggest division we have. Games were decided by a margin of 24.6 points per game. You had games won by 32, 30, 41, 38 points. The smallest margin of victory was just 3 points. But for the most part, you can see it was more than 3 touchdowns a game. 5A Division II, that was the closest one. We still had games decided by 27, 25, 23, 21 points a game. We did have a few close ones. That's where we had our closest margin of victory. 3 games decided by less than 10 points. One 1-point game, a 3-point game, and a 9-point game as well. Then things start getting even bigger. You go to the 4A classification. 25.5 points per game, the margin of victory here, including a 77-point win for one team in that first round. Also had games decided by 55, 36, 56, 31. So the list goes on and on here in Class 4A. In 3A, they went 29.1 points per game, including games decided by 42, 40, 43, 50, 48, 35, and 42. So that just goes on and on. And it keeps kind of getting bigger as you go down. In 2A, you had games decided by 56, 36, 54, 45, 55 for a margin of 27.8 points per game. The big one came down in 1A. 33.1 points per game was the deciding factor in games for the first round of the playoffs. So this is supposed to be the best teams in the state. That was the deciding margin of victory in 1A. That included games decided by 65, 66, 62 points, 48. Couple by 40, 39, 33, 42, so it goes on and on and on. So overall, it was just a little over 26 points per game, so almost 4 touchdowns per game these games were decided by in the first round of the playoffs. And I wanted to talk about this game in particular, Oceanside Collegiate. They're the defending state champs in 2A. Of course, they are now up in 3A, but they played Fox Creek in the first round, team from just over North Augusta. Now, I got to this game with about 9 minutes to go in the first quarter. Oceanside was already up 7-0. Right away, they scored that touchdown. They were up 14-0. and it didn't take much more from that as they kept going. Because late on in this one, as you see Oceanside playing defense, Fox Creek goes back to punt. Oceanside blocks it. They recover for a touchdown. So this is still about 5 minutes to go in the first quarter. They're up 21-0. That's the point when I left the game. I had enough highlights for Friday Night Lights at that point. So right after I left that game, a pick six from Oceanside Collegiate. Right after that, Fox Creek gets the ball back. They get a safety. So by the end of the first quarter, this game was at 30-0. Now, Fox Creek, like I said, they're just above North Augusta. They drove 3 hours here to play the first round of this playoff series against Oceanside Collegiate. They ended up losing 56-14, and that was only because they went to a running clock in the second half of that game. And then Fox Creek had to get back on a bus, go back to 3 hours to Fox Creek, probably getting just over about at 1 a.m. I would assume they would have gotten home at that point. So that's what we're keeping here with these first round of the playoffs. And it's not just football. Like I said, if you remember back at girls basketball, Military Magnets girls won, I believe it was 109-11 in the first round of the playoffs last year. So this is something that goes on in all sports. And you see it in girls soccer, boys soccer too. Oceanside Collegiate usually dominates in the first round of the soccer playoffs as well. Normally, they're playing a team who can barely field enough girls to put on a full team, and Oceanside will score 6-7 goals in the first couple of minutes before they start to slow things down and just kind of run the clock out. But we've seen that for years. Bishop England used to do that a lot in soccer as well, on both the boys and the girls side. So the point is, as I'm sitting here rambling, the playoffs just need to be cut down short. Let's just take a week out. Yeah, I'm saying it. Yeah, I'm getting a scoff from here in the newsroom. They need to be taken down a week. There is no need, when the vote went down and people were saying, well, you can't cut a week at the playoffs because people are going to get upset and it means a lot to these kids that play in the playoffs. I'm sure at some point it does mean a lot to them, but what value do they get out of this? Getting on a bus for 3 hours, driving to a game, losing by 40 plus, 60, 70 points, and then getting on the bus and riding back home another 3 hours after losing by maybe 11 touchdowns. I don't see how that does any good for them, how it does any good for the team that beat them. They have to worry about not getting their kids injured as they try to make a run in the postseason themselves. So if we just cut probably the teams in half that make the playoffs and just cut it down to 4 rounds instead of 5, that would help things out. They'd make more competitive games early on. It would make for better games. It would mean less travel for everyone involved, and kids who get eliminated from the playoffs, they could start to go on to the next sport, whether they're playing basketball or track and field in the indoors once the winter time comes, or whether you're in the spring or whatever, you get ready for your next season's sport. So that's all I wanted to do today, was ramble about how the high school playoffs need to be shorter. It has nothing to do with the fact that it would make my life a little bit easier as well. Just cross that off the list. All right, we'll be back on Friday with the Friday Night Lights tailgate. Everyone have a great week.